My son sent me a $2,000 Taylor Swift concert ticket for my birthday, and the very next day, he called asking, "So, how was the concert?" I held the phone tight, my heart steady, and told him I had given it to his mother-in-law because she loved Taylor. His silence cracked. Then came the shout, "You did what?" I knew in that moment the storm between us had only just begun. I woke with the kind of quiet you only get in the early hours of spring in Nashville. The air carried that faint sweetness of cut grass, and the porch swing outside creaked as if it were stretching its own bones. I fixed my usual black coffee, lined up my pillbox, and tried to settle into the day with no expectation beyond the ordinary. Then came a single knock, sharp, polite, and gone, before I reached the door. On the mat sat a large courier envelope, my name written in steady script across the front. No friendly wave, no conversation, just the back of a van already pulling away down the street. I bent slowly, feeling the stiffness in my knees, and held it in my hands. The return label wasn't personal. It was a ticketing company I'd only ever seen in flashy television ads. Lord have mercy, I whispered to myself. I hadn't been to a stadium show in decades, and the thought of squeezing into roaring crowds seemed laughable. Still, the envelope carried weight, more than paper should. I carried it inside and set it on the kitchen table. Old habits told me, breathe first, then open. When I finally tore the seal, a glossy sleeve slid out. Bold letters read Taylor Swift, the Eras Tour. I blinked at the seat number, then at the printed receipt tucked beside it. $2,000 for one ticket. My mouth went dry. $2,000 could patch a roof or cover 3 months of groceries. My jaw tightened, and I felt my pulse climb. On top of it lay a post-it in my son Silas's handwriting. Enjoy. Let's start fresh. The message looked simple, but every line carried performance more than sincerity. I pressed the note flat with my palm and let out a slow breath. I thought of who might really find joy in this. Opaline Mercer came to mind, Maribel's mama, a retired nurse who sang along to Taylor's songs while clipping her rose bushes. She'd light up in that stadium, while I'd be counting bathroom breaks and exit routes. Folks my age say it plain. If it isn't for you, pass it to someone who'll use it. That sounded about right. So I called her up. "Opaline, you got a minute? I have something that belongs with you." When I drove over, her bungalow smelled of lemon oil and fresh laundry. I explained I couldn't manage stadium crowds and pressed the sleeve into her hands. She shook her head, insisting it was too much. I answered, "It's yours now. No strings. Go make memories." We sat with iced tea, laughed about bracelets and the way young girls traded beads at concerts. Hurry! As I drove back past the stadium banners, a strange peace washed over me, like dropping off a borrowed library book right on time. That evening, I tucked the empty sleeve into a drawer, thinking I'd close the matter. But the next morning, my phone rang with Silas's name flashing. I let it buzz once before answering. He started off smooth. "Hey, Ma, so, how was the concert?" I steadied myself. "I gave the ticket to Opaline. She's the real fan. You know I don't do crowds." The line went still. Then his voice cracked sharp. "You gave it to her?" I repeated calmly. "She'll actually enjoy it. That matters." His anger burst through. "You did what? Do you know what that cost? Do you realize what I did for you?" I kept my voice measured. "If it was for me, you'd respect what I enjoy. I don't need noise to feel loved." He snorted, accusing me of tossing away his gift. I ended the call myself. "We'll talk when you can use your indoor voice." My hand was steady as I set the phone down. Minutes later, a text buzzed. Through just 4 words from Silas. "We're not done." I sat in my quiet kitchen, stared at that empty sleeve in the drawer, and said out loud, if the ticket was a kindness, it should have felt like one. So why does it feel like a bill? The morning after that sharp phone call, I woke to the hum of the thermostat and the buzz of my phone on the counter. My banking app flashed a reminder. Payment sent 3 days ago. $2,000 to Silas. The memo read, utilities shortfall. My coffee turned bitter in my mouth. That was the exact cost of the ticket he'd called my gift. I sat down at the kitchen table, ledger open, pen in hand. I'd circled that transfer with a note that said, asked on a rush. I whispered what I'd heard older women say all my life. If it don't add up, someone's tipping the scale. His voice from last night replayed in my ears. That edge of ownership when he called it my gift. It wasn't generosity. It was accounting dressed up with a bow. I dialed the senior line at my bank, steady as if I were asking about the weather. The rep recognized my voice and pulled up the record. Yes, the Zelle ID matched Silas's number. Yes, the transfer cleared on that date and time. I asked for a PDF confirmation, and by noon it was printed, stapled to my ledger, dated and initialed. I scrolled through my messages, found his text asking for a short float to cover bills with no mention of concerts. I forwarded it all to myself, attached the photo of the empty ticket sleeve, and labeled it ticket financed by Mom. My grandmother always said, keep receipts, feelings fade, paper doesn't. I stared at the post-it he'd left, the one that said, enjoy. Let's start fresh. Those words read more like a press release than a son reaching for his mother. His first question last night hadn't been about me. It was about performance, whether I'd shown up at the stadium like a loyal fan. I typed out a reply. A gift should fit the person. Stadiums aren't me. Next time, ask what I enjoy. He sent back a thumbs up, then wrote, I went out on a limb for you. I could almost laugh. That limb had grown from my bank account. I answered carefully. We'll talk at a neutral table. Saturday? Noon? His response came quick. Sunday brunch with the family. You can thank me properly. My eyes lingered on those words, thank and properly, until they stopped stinging. I needed to ground myself. I texted Opaline, just a check-in. Parking, clear bag policy, whether she had good walking shoes. She replied with a picture of a bracelet kit, ready to trade beads like the young girls. I smiled. That's where the joy belonged. On my errands, I passed Nissan Stadium. Flags snapping in the breeze. I felt no pull, just relief. At the grocery, a woman my age said her granddaughter was going to the show. I'll be home making meatloaf. She laughed. We shared that kind of laughter you only get from knowing your place in the world. I picked up printer ink and folders. If Silas wanted to play with paperwork, I'd build a cabinet. Before supper, I sent Maribel a polite note, confirming Sunday brunch time and address, bringing a pie. She answered with the location and a heart emoji, adding, Silas is excited. Big weekend. That word, big, rang in my ears. I laid out my leather folder, slipped in the receipts, and wrote 3 lines on a notepad. I don't do stadiums. I don't owe thanks for my own money. I choose where my joy goes. As the sun sank, Silas sent a calendar invite. Family brunch. Announcements. I stared at that subject line long enough to taste the old bitterness of being managed. I clicked accept and typed my note. I'll bring the pie and the truth. Then I set out my Sunday blazer, tucked the folder into my tote, and set a pie tin on the counter. If he wanted an audience, he would get one. I showed up 5 minutes early with my homemade pie balanced in one hand and my leather folder tucked firm under the other. Age teaches you where to sit, so I chose a chair against the back wall where I could see the whole room. The table was already dressed like a stage, pitchers of sweet tea, folded napkins, even a handwritten sign on the buffet that read, Family Announcements. Maribel greeted me with a bright smile, but the twitch in her voice betrayed nerves. Silas moved through the crowd too loudly, touching shoulders like he was shaking votes. Not kin. I scanned the table. Phones face up, eyes alert. I repeated my mantra. Stay adult, stay factual. Keep receipts. Silas tapped a glass with his fork, calling the room to attention. Family, he began. I did something big for Mom's birthday. A $2,000. Taylor Swift ticket. He let the number ring. Then he smirked. But she didn't make it. Rumor is, it got repurposed. Heads tilted toward me as though I'd misplaced rent money. He added with a shrug. Some folks don't understand value. A few murmurs rose, fueling his performance. I kept my hands folded, expression soft, letting the silence gather around him. Then he pulled out a sheet of paper, cropped bank details, a snippet of my text about a utility shortfall. He He was framing dependency where there was none. My jaw set, but I stayed still. When the chatter subsided, I rose just enough for my voice to carry, "A gift that fits the giver but not the receiver is a billboard, not a blessing." I opened my folder and held up the complete PDF, the uncut transaction record. This Zelle transfer, dated 3 days before the ticket, went from me to Silas. What you call generosity was my money. The elders at the table murmured, "Tell it." I passed the page across the table. "Feelings fade," I said evenly. "Paper doesn't—" Maribel's smile faltered. She knew email headers didn't lie. I lowered myself back into my chair, folder closed, but steady on my lap. "We'll discuss gratitude when the ledger balances." The air shifted when Opaline cleared her throat. Her hands shook, but her voice held. "Silas told me, 'Don't tell Mom I gave you the ticket.'" Forks froze mid-air. A cousin whispered, "Why would he say that?" Opaline looked down at her napkin ring, steadying herself. "I offered to give it back. He said it was better this way." Silas snapped. "Opaline, that's not—" She cut him off gently. "That's how it happened." Her calmness struck harder than any shout. I folded my hands tighter, letting her truth fill the space. In that moment, the leash under the bow became visible to everyone. I scanned the room one last time and spoke clearly. "Do not use my name for your stories." My voice didn't waver. "I don't need applause. I require respect." Then I sat, and the silence grew heavy enough to bow the air. Silas forced a laugh, announcing there were bigger things to share, but his eyes had already hardened. I knew this was only the opening round. A man who needs an audience will always script a villain. Today, he ran out of paper. Silas wasn't finished with his theatrics. After Opaline's words had cracked the room open, he reached for a leather folio tucked at his side. With a flourish, he spread papers across the sideboard as if we'd wandered into a realtor's office. Conversation dipped into uneasy silence. He used that cheerful salesman tone. "Just a little household housekeeping, some cleanup, streamlining bills." His eyes darted to the older relatives, fishing for nods. I noticed the letterheads didn't match. One cover read "Service Plan," but the pages beneath bore bank seals and county logos. Maribel, too smooth, set a pen by my plate. I slid it back with 2 fingers. A cousin chuckled. "Paperwork on a Sunday?" I answered evenly. "We don't sign in a hurry." Folding my hands, church taught me to read the fine print. Motherhood taught me to read the room. I pulled the top sheet closer, bold heading, home maintenance enrollment, but inside, the story shifted, auto draft authorization, mailing address change, and buried near the end, a limited power of attorney. The authorized party line already carried Silas Drexler's name. I read the words aloud, each syllable crisp. Limited power of attorney to manage and endorse instruments. I lifted my eyes. "That's a no." Silas tightened his smile. "It's just housekeeping. Mom, I'm trying to help." My reply was plain. "Help doesn't hide behind a home warranty brochure." Turning to the table, I added, "If a cover sheet doesn't match the pages, that's your cue to slow down." Murmurs of agreement rippled. Women who'd signed leases and mortgages nodded knowingly. Then my phone buzzed. An email from my bank. Sunday. Timing too sharp to be chance. Fraud alert. A new card on file added to a resale platform. Last 4 digits, my Visa. The one I keep locked for groceries. I tapped the message open and let the room hear it on speaker. Card ending in 1423 was added as backup payment on Wednesday. Silas's face twitched. "It's a glitch," he muttered. I shot back, "Glitches don't memorize my last 4. Holding up the phone beside his papers, I said, "Ticket, backup card, auto draft. That's not housekeeping. That's a leash." Opaline whispered, "Lord." As a chair groaned in the silence, I didn't gloat. I documented. I slid the packet of papers back across the table. "I don't sign blind. I take copies. I show someone who doesn't share your last name." Silas tried guilt. "I'm stepping up and you make me look like a crook." I kept my tone even. "If the shoe doesn't fit, you don't feel it." I asked Maribel for her phone. She hesitated, then handed it over, camera already open. a small act of conscience. I photographed each page, corner to corner, timestamp visible, and asked 2 cousins to witness that I declined to sign. Then I placed my leather folder down like a gavel. We're done with surprises. Next time, we schedule and we read. Silas gathered the papers too fast, edges curling in his hands. Fine, he spat. We'll handle this Monday at the bank. I nodded. Perfect. I prefer offices where pens click loud enough to wake the truth. His smile returned, thin and sharp, the kind men wear when they've already made a call. Opaline slipped her hand over mine beneath the table. Quiet solidarity. I knew this battle had just shifted battlegrounds. If he wanted signatures, he'd learn mine only goes where my dignity does. By Monday morning, the whispers beat me to the grocery store. 2 women near the produce bins leaned close, one whispering, "She pawned the ticket. Can you believe it?" They didn't lower their voices enough. I caught the words as plain as the apples on sale. I kept walking, back straight, but in the glass door of the freezer, I saw my reflection, jaw clenched, eyes tired. At church, a deacon stopped me in the corridor, smiling thin. "I thought you'd be in Atlanta by now." "Front row." His tone wasn't curiosity, it was judgment. That's when I knew. Silas had painted me ungrateful, and his version was spreading faster than Sunday gossip. I murmured under my breath what an elder once told me. When lies run marathons, truth takes the bus, but truth still arrives. By noon, the floodgates were wide. My cousin from Memphis called, voice hesitant. "Why'd you sell your birthday gift?" A neighbor left a voicemail, her words stiff with pity. A choir friend texted me a screenshot from Facebook. Someone had posted, "Sad when a parent can't appreciate sacrifice." No names, but enough breadcrumbs for family to follow. The post was already collecting likes, and I recognized Maribel's heart emoji among them. Not bold enough to write the lie herself, but willing to fan the smoke. I saved every screenshot, forwarded texts to my email, and wrote down names. My folder was growing. Each rumor logged like evidence in a trial. He was crafting smoke and pointing to me as the fire. But I've lived long enough to know, you corner the match striker, not the flame. By afternoon, the storm landed on my porch. Silas himself. He showed up without calling, his expression painted in wounded innocence. "Why are people saying I tricked you? You're embarrassing me," he said, voice pitched higher than usual. I cracked the screen door. Nothing more. "Embarrassment doesn't come from me, son. It follows what you do." He waved printouts of those posts like gospel, insisting I was spreading the talk. I looked him dead in the eye. "Screenshots aren't scripture. They're graffiti," he huffed. "I put myself out there for you." My answer came low and sharp. "No, you put me out there for yourself." A mower stopped down the block, the neighbor watching without pretending otherwise. Silas raised his voice, but I lowered mine. "Control is in tone, not volume." He spat. "You'll regret this," I whispered. "Not today." Minutes later came a softer knock. Opaline Mercer, shoulders hunched, eyes damp. She stepped inside and pulled a folded paper from her purse. "He pushed me," she admitted. "Said I should sign this, to say I volunteered to take the ticket. Said it would keep peace." The draft was in his handwriting, blanks waiting for her name. She looked ashamed. I felt cornered. I laid the page flat on my table, smoothing it with care, then slid it into my folder. Cornered people tell the truth when the light's on. I told her gently, "You just flipped the switch." She breathed out, shoulders lighter, and I promised, "You won't stand alone." That night, I cooked cornbread, the smell filling my kitchen with something steady. Elders always said, "Feed yourself before you fight." I sat at the counter, folder heavy under my hand, each rumor and confession stacked like bricks. I texted Detective Ronan Vale, folder growing. "Need consult tomorrow." His reply was quick. "Bring everything." I closed the folder with a firm press. If Silas thought gossip was fire, he hadn't seen me carry both water and gasoline. When I pulled into my driveway Tuesday at noon, the sight stopped me cold. Cars lined the curb like it was Easter Sunday. Inside, my own living room had been rearranged into a waiting room. Relatives perched on my chairs as if summoned by court order. And there stood Silas, passing out glasses of sweet tea like he was master of the house. I didn't bother with pleasantries. "Who called this meeting?" I asked. Silence fell, and all eyes slid towards Silas. "Maribel. Too quick." Chimed. "Just thought it best to clear the air." Her voice rehearsed like a press release. My hand pressed against the leather folder resting on the console table. I lowered myself last, dead center on my own couch, claiming ground without raising a word. Silas cleared his throat, grin wide enough to show the room his confidence. I've always been the one stepping up, covering utilities, taking care of tickets, handling paperwork, even saving Mom from herself. He gestured toward Maribel, who nodded like a dutiful witness. He pulled out cropped receipts, parading them as proof of his devotion. Family. I've carried the load. All I ask is a little recognition. Murmurs rose, some heads nodding, others folding arms. I leaned back, saying nothing. Age had taught me. Give a man enough rope, and he'll tie his own knot. Silas's voice swelled with pride, painting himself as the provider, the protector. But my jaw set, because I knew the truth sat waiting in a cedar box. I rose slowly, carrying the small cedar chest from the console. The room hushed, with deliberate care. I placed it on the coffee table and turned the key. Inside were bank statements stamped and dated, proof I had been paying utilities for 3 years. Not Silas. I laid them out one by one, the ink still bold. Then I unfolded a note written in my late husband's hand. "Keep control of the house deed. Althea, protect yourself." Gasps circled the room. A cousin whispered, "So she's been carrying it." Silas flushed crimson, tried to wave it off. "Old papers don't mean current truth." I met his glare and said quietly, "Old papers show who's been consistent, and consistency is truth." His composure cracked. "You undermine me in front of everyone," he shouted. "You'd rather see me fail than let me lead." My answer was calm, sharper than any yell. "Leadership doesn't come from forged signatures or borrowed credit cards." Opaline, voice clear, added, "She's not undermining you. Silas, she's showing what you hoped we'd never see." His palm slammed the coffee table, rattling the cedar box but failing to topple it. I didn't flinch. "This home has seen worse storms than you." I told him, and it's still standing. The room split, some siding with him, others edging closer to me. Over the din, my phone buzzed. Detective Ronan Vale's text glowed on the screen. "Ready when you are. Bring what you've gathered." I stood, placed the cedar box back on the console, and looked straight at Silas. "This tribunal is adjourned. Next session isn't in my living room. It's downtown." His lips curled. "You wouldn't dare." I met his smile with steady eyes. I already did. He thought family court meant cousins on couches. I meant court with a judge. Sunrise found me walking into the county courthouse, leather folder under one arm, cedar box under the other. Security barely glanced at me before waving me through. There's a respect older women sometimes command, the kind that comes not from titles but from surviving storms. At the clerk's window, I laid out my documents. Fraud reports tied to the auto draft attempts, the suspicious address change, every timestamp logged in my yellow pad. The clerk pressed embossed seals onto my forms, the paper heavier with each stamp. I asked about temporary protective orders for my accounts. She handed me a checklist written in plain English. Not riddles. I made careful notes. Form names, copy counts, fees paid. A young man held the door on my way out. "Ma'am?" I nodded back. My age was not a weakness here. It was my authority. By mid-morning, I sat across from Detective Ronan Vale. The recorder on the table sat silent, but his eyes were sharp. One by one, I slid documents across, Zelle screenshots, the backup card email, even the cropped receipts Silas had used at brunch beside the originals. I added the cedar box contents, 3 years of stamped utility payments, my late husband's handwritten reminder about the deed. Detective Vale took notes, slow and steady. "This fits the frame of elder financial exploitation," he said. No drama, no promises, just process. Before I left, he gave me what mattered. You did exactly right, receipts before reactions. My shoulders dropped an inch. Vindication doesn't shout, it exhales. At the downtown bank, the glass office felt colder than the courthouse, but procedure gave me warmth. I asked the manager to remove Silas from every authorization, revoke the address change, and lock future drafts behind dual verification. She printed a change summary, time-stamped and initialed. I slipped it into my folder under a fresh tab, bank protections. She even agreed to a letter noting suspected misuse for the detective. As I walked past the velvet ropes, something inside me clicked. Not revenge, just the clean sound of a lock sliding into place. By afternoon, the rumors that had stained my name began to recede. 3 calls came, cousin, choir friend, neighbor, all with apologies shaped like excuses. Maribel texted, "Taking down that post, shouldn't have added the heart." I replied with a single period. Boundaries don't need paragraphs. Opaline Mercer delivered a signed statement, witnessed by her neighbor, admitting Silas's pressure. I forwarded it straight to Detective Vale. At the grocery, the same clerk who whispered before now said, "Heard you set the record straight." I smiled. Records don't speak unless someone writes them down. By evening, consequences circled back. Silas left a voicemail full of panic. "They froze some stuff. You went too far." A group text to the family followed. "Lawyer up if you're going to accuse me. Innocent men don't hurt witnesses." A cousin sent me a shaky video, Silas ranting in a parking lot. "She owes me for years." That sentence sealed itself. I saved it under a new folder. Silas, self-statements. As the sun set, I slipped Eldon's old recording onto a thumb drive labeled in his hand. "Don't let anyone buy your silence." I drafted a simple family message. If we meet again, it will be with full documents and witnesses only. Then I plated a slice of pie. Wrap the rest for Opaline. Joy belongs where it can be eaten. Tomorrow I wouldn't carry rumors or rebuttals. I would carry the record, and the record would talk. Mid-morning light leaked through the curtains, but I pulled them closed until the room dimmed like a theater. I set the mini projector on my sideboard, slid in the thumb drive labeled in my hand, and waited for the small hum to steady. Maribel hovered by the doorway, her weight shifting like she hadn't decided which side of the fence she stood on. Silas came in late, loud as ever. "We're not doing shows," he barked. I looked him straight in the eye. "Correction, we're doing records." I laid out chairs in neat rows. Opaline Mercer sat first, folding her hands as if to steady her breath. My leather folder rested on the table, tabs peeking out, bank protections, statements, witness letters. I tapped my phone to record. Memory can fade, but tape won't. The projector whirred, and there he was. Eldon Jericho, my late husband, alive in voice if not in body. His eyes were calm, his voice steady. "Althea, keep your deed, keep your name, and don't sign what you didn't read." A hush fell so thick I could hear the hum of the bulb. Then the second line came, the one I had played over in my mind for years. "Don't let anyone buy your silence with gifts." The words struck harder than any accusation I could have spoken. I lifted the change summary from the bank and the backup card alert, holding them up as living proof that Eldon's counsel mattered even now. Maribel's chin dropped, a tear sliding down. It didn't erase her part, but it told me she finally saw the damage. I froze the screen on Eldon's face, letting him sit as my witness. Silas tried his usual performance, puffing himself up. "I did the heavy lifting. I saved her time. I raised one hand, pressed a button, and the wall filled with his own parking lot rant. "She owes me for years." The silence afterward was louder than his shouting ever was. I clicked again, his cropped screenshots beside my complete PDFs, side by side. The trimming spoke louder than I needed to. "Did you add my card as a backup without telling me?" I asked. Silence again. This time, confession shaped like stillness. Detective Ronan Vale stepped into the doorway. No flourish, just presence. I read aloud Opaline's signed statement. "Don't tell Mom." The words weren't mine. They belonged to him. The projector's light cast across Silas's face. For once, the spotlight wasn't his to control. I opened the door and brought in the mobile notary waiting quietly in the hall. She checked IDs, pressed her stamp into the revocation papers, and notarized a cease and desist addressed squarely to Silas. I signed a bank directive naming a trust officer as my sole financial agent going forward. Detective Vale accepted copies. Making notes for his case file, I handed Silas a single page. You are no longer authorized to handle any affairs in my name. Any further contact goes through counsel. He stammered about family. I answered, steady as stone. Family's a verb. You stop doing it. The notary's stamp landed heavy, like a gavel in my own house. When the last chair scraped back, I walked Opaline to the porch. I pressed a box of pie in her hands. She smiled for the first time in weeks. Maribel got a short message from me. When you're ready to speak truth, not emojis, call. I packed the projector and thumb drive back into the cedar box. Eldon's voice tucked safe once more. In my notebook, I wrote 3 words. Receipts before reactions. The house exhaled with me. I slid the cedar box to the top shelf where the sun found it by afternoon. My phone buzzed. Subpoena confirmed. Wheels turning outside these walls. If Silas reached for my name again, he'd find the same thing he found today. A record that doesn't blink.